Hello. Welcome once again to the lecture series that we're doing for Theology 333. My name is Dr. Gregory A. Jones, and in this section, I want you to first and foremost get a chance to go to the websites that we will set up for you for this portion of our study. We're going to be looking at KWANZAA. Also, KWANZAA is in your reading material, and I want you to make sure that you visit your reading material in relationship to KWANZAA and KWANZAA principles, Nguzo Saba. This holiday, as you can see, we're going to look at the various kinds of issues and cultural principles that connect to KWANZAA. And as you can see, we have culturally, we have kind of shaped our lecture area so that you can get a sense of what the KWANZAA culture and the KWANZAA ambiance is in terms of that. I remember in the 60s hearing about KWANZAA for the first time, not really understanding the need and purpose of a cultural holiday. However, it's very, very, very important for us to understand the necessity for KWANZAA celebration as a cultural holiday. This holiday is observed from December the 26th to January the 1st. Again, its focus is to pay tribute to the rich cultural roots of people of African diaspora. Though first inspired by African Americans, many of the African descent celebrate this occasion today. It has grown to include all whose roots are in the motherland. Its concept is neither religious nor political, but is rooted strongly in the cultural awareness. This is not a substitute for Christmas. However, gifts may be exchanged with the principles of Nguzo Saba always in mind. Gifts are given to reinforce personal growth and achievement with benefits to collective community. I want to begin by talking to you about the gentleman behind KWANZAA. This brother has done and been a force in the African American community for many, many, many years. His name is Dr. Malunga Karinga, and he's professor and chair of Africana Studies at California State University, Long Beach. He holds 2 PhDs. His first is in political science, with focus on theory and practice of nationalism from the United States International University. And his second is in social ethics with a focus on classical African ethics of ancient Africa and Egypt from the University of Southern California. Professor Karinga is the foremost exponent of Mayan ethical thought, having developed over the last 3 decades a creative and scholarly KWANZAA interpretation of ancient African ethical thought as a living tradition and as a useful philosophical option for critical reflection on the urgent issues of our time. His second dissertation, a major work of 803 pages entitled Mayat, the Moral Idea of Ancient Egypt, a study in classical African studies, and was submitted in 1996, was the most requested work from UMI out of 45,000 dissertations. It has received praise from the Africana Studies and Egyptological communities as a seminal and defining work, which has opened up a valuable new dialogue with ancient Egyptian thought and culture. So this brother has done lots of work in dealing with the issue of ethical and cultural kinds of principles. And so he had his hands on the forming and the shaping of this great cultural holiday of African Americans. Though many Americans don't know much about KWANZAA, including the African Americans, it's a beautiful holiday that all can share. Kiba Solomon of colorlines.com, federal civil rights attorney Charles Coleman Jr. and Dinah Washington, author of Little Rabbit's KWANZAA, joined in gathering information and putting it online so that more people can have information about it. This holiday honors African heritage and celebrates family and community and culture. It takes its name from the phrase Matunda yi KWANZAA, which in Swahili means first fruits. Kwanzaa's origin lies in the 1960s civil rights and black freedom movements, and is a way of commemorating African heritage of black Americans whose ethnic history was stripped away by the slave trade. Now, when I said that this was something new to me in the 1960s, I was not familiar with people who were Pan-African or people who were supportive of African culture and African studies. So it was important for me to hear about Kwanzaa during the 60s, simply because that was a time of black ferment. We had lost a lot in the 60s. Malcolm had been murdered in 65. We see King being assassinated, murdered in 68. We see Bobby Kennedy, John Kennedy, Medgar Evers, and a host of other leaders within the global community as well as in our United States being killed off. And my lecture on, what was happening in terms of black nationalism and the kinds of struggles in the civil rights movement kind of reflects that. We see people like Patrice Lumumba being murdered in the global community. We see the struggle of the African independent nations going on at this particular time. So this cultural holiday that Karenga brings to bear in the 1960s and 1966 was very important to us as a people, and very important to me. It allowed me to understand what it meant to wear an afro or natural, wear your hair natural. It allowed me to find pride for the color of my skin. It allowed me to recognize that there were other cultural communities other than Europeans and Western Europeans that I could be a part of and could be proud of. It allowed me to ground myself in my culture in a very fundamental way, I believe. And even though I didn't participate in Kwanzaa celebrations early on, I was proud that we had such celebrations, and I was proud that there were far-reaching and far-thinking people who would be willing to provide for the masses of the community this type of cultural holiday. So let's get into kind of what Kwanzaa is about. Swahili is the most widely spoken African language and was thus chosen as the language for the Kwanzaa principles. According to Karenga, Kwanzaa was created to reaffirm and restore our rootedness in African culture. It is a cultural rather than religious holiday and can be celebrated regardless of a person's faith tradition. So you don't have to be of a particular tradition to be involved in Kwanzaa. Muslims, Christians, Jews, more Science Temple individuals, wherever you come from, wherever you hail from, you can, in tradition, in religious tradition, you can participate in this cultural holiday. As I said earlier, it's about first fruits celebration. It dates back to Egypt and Nubia to commemorate the harvest. And some of the colors. Let's talk about some of the colors. The colors black, red, and green are part of Kwanzaa celebrations due to their special significance. Black represents the people. Red is for the blood, uniting all those with African ancestry, as well as the bloodshed during slavery and the civil rights movement. And green is for the lush land of Africa. These colors also reflect the Pan-African movement itself. I remember having jackets and shoes and scarves, all depicting that color scheme, simply because it was a popular notion to say red is for the blood, black is for the people, and green is for our connection to Africa. These colors also reflect the Pan-African movement itself. Some of the principles. There are 7 principles of Kwanzaa celebrated on each day of the holiday, known as the Nguzo Saba. And if you can see it in our backdrop here, the Nguzo Saba, this is basically just a banner that kind of reflects some of the images of Kwanzaa, but it has the Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles of Kwanzaa on it, which I'll be going through with you today. There are 7 principles that you should celebrate each day of the holiday. known collectively as the Nguzo Saba, and we would celebrate them both in both Swahili and in English. The first one is Umoja, unity. The second one is Kushagulia, self-determination. The third is Ujima, collective work and responsibility. Ujama, cooperative economics. Nia, purpose. Kuumba, creativity. And Imani, faith. Families gather during Kwanzaa to light their kanara, which this is the kanara, a candle holder with 7 candles. The colors of red, green, and black are right here. The black candle is placed in the center and used to light the other flames from left to right. Together, the candles are called the Mashuna Saba, and they represent the 7 principles. So you would light a candle each day. Other traditions include the Kunkambi, Umoja, or Unity Cup, which is to pour libations in honors of ancestors departed. We saw that in Cooley High. When I was younger, we were watching Cooley High, and we see libations being poured. We didn't understand, and we thought it was just a local, colloquial kind of cultural thing that was going on. It goes back much deeper in terms of our rootedness as a people. We see songs and dances that are a popular way of celebrating Kwanzaa. Lift every voice and sing. Known as the Black National Anthem, is a song that celebrates the struggles and triumphs of Black Americans. And I would say that that musical connection goes much, much, much deeper. There are specific cultural songs that connect us to who we are. Let me give you an example about that, and we'll talk about music much later. But Donny Hathaway's "It's Christmas" is as much as a cultural song and connected to the African American community as any other song that we want to hear. It's cultural, but it's also seasonal. And there are many such songs. I mean, you know, we talk about Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. That whole album is a cultural kind of group of songs that connect us to a particular inspirational and cultural evolution, if you will. And there are other songs that we can hear. The Staple Singers are our group. We have a rich heritage coming out of the religious traditions of Africa, but there are other cultural kinds of songs that connect us in a very intimate way to that. So those are songs that will kind of integrate itself in terms of being a part of this celebration. The greetings. Kwanzaa greetings are in Swahili and English. Habari is a traditional Swahili greeting, and the response is each of the principles depending on which day the Kwanzaa is. Other greetings include Hariri za Kwanzaa, or simply Happy Kwanzaa. Okay, so let me give you some updated information about Kwanzaa, and then we're going to go a little more into the 7 principles so that you could have a better understanding of it. I want you to get a sense of how this works in line and parallel with and integrates itself in terms of the African American religious experience. This year, 2013-14, we'll see the 47th, 48th annual Kwanzaa, the African American holiday celebrated from December 26th to 31st. It's estimated that some 18 million African Americans take part actively, publicly in Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa, as I said before, is not a religious holiday. At this time of great social change for African Americans, Karenga saw this as a vision of how we could come together. It's based on our year-end harvest festival, which has taken place throughout Africa for thousands of years. Karenga chose a phrase from Swahili because the language is used by various peoples from Africa. So we do Kwanzaa because I think it allows us a pride-filled way of saying we are here, we are not going anywhere culturally. We are rooted in our Africanness, and there's nothing wrong with that. I want to talk just briefly a moment about how Karenga was attacked when he created this cultural holiday, and still being attacked today. I mean, you know, vilification of African American leadership happens all the time As soon as African Americans step out of the repressive and oppressive systemic racist attitude of keeping black men into a particular, or black women for that matter, or all black people into a particular box or particular perspective, this brother sought to step out of that and provide something directly for his people, and immediately he was vilified. He was jumped on, and he was seen to be something less than what he is. And that's kind of a normal pattern of how white Western Europeans address what they would call militancy, or what they would call nationalistic kinds of perspective. I don't see this brother as saying, I don't see him saying that other people should not be doing other things. I simply see him saying that this is something that's valuable for his people, and he wants to promote that, and he promoted it, and he has spent his lifetime in an activist mode, finding ways in which to enculturate and to develop and to nurture African and African American people. What's wrong with that? It seems like whenever Africans begin to stand up for self or stand up for community, they have to expect Western European culture to come in and say somehow, some way, this is contrary to their interests, and so they have to attack it. And so, I mean, you know, I guess this is just the normal kind of behaviors we see, but I want you to pay attention to that, because this has been part and parcel of the development of the African American religious experience. This has been something that has moved along and moved parallel to any efforts at evolving a particular perspective that promotes culture, or promotes the development of African peoples in African American in American culture, American society. Okay, so I'm going to go through the 7 principles again, just to share some information with you very briefly, and then we'll wrap up our section on Kwanzaa. Umoja, meaning unity. The action is building a community that holds together. It's more than just us getting together on the holidays when we talk about Umoja. Unity should be the basic and formidable kind of foundation that we develop as a people. And I notice how, and I've been noticing how with the social media, with Twitter, with Facebook, and with all the like, that, you know, we have a tendency to dissolve our interests into this great sea of what I would call status quo. But there's a distinctiveness about Africans and African Americans that need to be directed toward the development of a collective agenda and a unified agenda for us as a people. Kujagulia, meaning self-determination. Speaking for yourself and making choices that benefit the community. What we're talking about there is self-definition, being able to define for yourself and self-identify those things that are important to you and to the community that you live in and that you serve. That's something that you need to do over and aboard. We need to do over and aboard the kind of things that we do with others. And it doesn't. And I'm not talking about you not having an alliance. I'm not talking about you being separate from European community. I'm simply saying that there ought to be a concern, a prioritized concern about African Americans in institutions that we participate in, work in, live in. And I find that when I'm here at the university and I raise issues about African American students, people look at me and say, well, why? Why are you talking about African American students? I said, because we need to have a voice. We need to support one another in the efforts that serve our interests in institutions, and this is one of those institutions that we need to do that in. The third one, Ujima, meaning collective work and responsibility, helping others within the community. One of the things we need to learn how to do better at, and we're doing it, is to work together as community. And with that distinctiveness that we talked about, with that unity we talked about, how do we work together? What are the priorities and the developments of strategies to work together? Creating organizations and institutions that serve the interests of our own community is something that you need to do. What is that collective work? We need to be able to identify it, prioritize it, focus in on it, and be about the business of participating in it. Ujama, meaning cooperative economics. This one is very important when we talk about action supporting businesses that care about the community. I've seen over and over again historically how African Americans do not support their own businesses, that will go thousands of miles and spend tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars on other people's stuff. And when we got people in the community who are producing goods and who are entrepreneurs who are having a hard time being supported, we need to support one another. NIA, meaning a sense of purpose, action, setting goals that benefit the community. We need to be clear about the things that we ought to be about the business of doing in our own community. This is a very, very significant KWANZAA principle that we need to be involved in. What is our purpose? Why are we here? Are we building institutions? Are we supporting other institutions that are contrary to our interests? And why can't we support institutions within our community that support our interests? And what's wrong with that? If everybody else is taking care of their business, why is something wrong with us when we step out of the box and say, well, what we want to do is create institutions to serve our own interests, our own community, and our progeny, our future. We need to be about the business of finding and defining clearly our purpose. KWANZAA, we need to not lose our creativity. KWANZAA means making the community better and more beautiful. We need to think about creative ways with the use of technology, with the use of some of all these resources that we're starting to see beginning to take place in the African American community, us becoming more global. We need to be able to form a more creative relationship with the global community as well as with one another. There are thousands, literally thousands of artists and craftsmen and guild people who have creative, beyond the bounds of imagination that are in our African American communities that we do not tap into. And I've seen it over and over and over again where older guys who are craftsmen, who make furniture, who can paint, who have art ability, who have musical talents, who have lyrical talents, talents of writing, are confined and lost because basically we don't want to take time to search out the creativity of our own community. More museums are needed, more art galleries are needed in our own community. And guess what? There are other people out of other communities who recognize our creativity. They have no problem coming in our community and snatching whatever creative kind of abilities we have and taking it and utilize it in their interests. And I think we should be able to, I'm not opposed to people being able to help people gain their creativity, but we need to be about the business of prioritizing, lifting up our creativity of our own people in our own community. Imani, meaning faith, believing that a better world can be created for communities now and in the future. We need to have Sankofa. We need to be able to look back into our past and see the greatness of our people and be able to vision that greatness in the future. We need to be able to do that without any kind of feelings of less thanness or loss of value. We need to not be intimidated, to have to be able to talk like and walk like people who we are not. We should be able to hold up our language, our culture, our abilities on our own without any fear of somebody coming in and tearing it down. I deal with this reality every day. I deal with people every day saying, let's homogenize, let's put it mainstream, everyone in the global community, and they all need to think like this, they all need to act like this, and this is the standard and value of that we say are important. And that thing affects people. When you see people in the African American community who if you didn't hear them and didn't know them, they wouldn't know who they were. You see how they're being influenced by European culture and European society. Okay, so let's go review it again. The principles are Umoja, Kukichagulia, Ujima, Ujama, Nia, Kuumba, Imani. These are the principles of KWANZAA. The 7 principles of the Nguzo Saba. We want to celebrate, and we want to always be able to say in this celebration that these things are important to us and important. Please go to the site for KWANZAA and look at it and pay attention to all the wonderful, colorful artifacts that we have available for you in this lecture so that you can see the connection of this wonderful holiday that strengthens the religious traditions of all African and African American peoples. Thank you.